Thank you for joining today's conversation again with Dr. Patricia Zurita Onya. I hope that there is something valuable here in today's conversation to help you soften in your relationship, to work with the fear that might emerge so that you can feel more openness, flexibility, and compassion in how you show up in relationship. You can find today's links, takeaways, and a full transcript, as well as the free relationship guide here on drjessicahiggins.com. Click on podcast and you'll find today's episode. If you'd like to strengthen your relationship with more clarity and care, download the free relationship guide, 12 relationship principles to strengthen your love, to practice the foundations of secure, lasting connection. You'll find powerful ways to deepen trust, improve communication, and keep love alive. Let's get started. Patricia, thank you for joining us. I'm excited about our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm super excited to chat with you.
Yes, I know you have done so much to support people that are negotiating different experiences as it relates to overthinking or indecision, procrastination, perfectionism, and dealing with anxiety and how that might manifest. And can you say a little bit about how this became a focus for you?
That's such a great question. Thank you so much for asking. The truth is that I travel in this life with my own anxieties. I don't think of myself as an anxious child or as an anxious teenager, but I was more in the midst of the dictatorship in my country in Bolivia. So I understand very early how a group of people can be shaped by fear. I even witnessed violence firsthand. However, there were so many regulations about what was a law and what wasn't a law in a public setting. So that was my first experience to see how fear shapes people's behaviors. And later on, I think, I don't recall now the exact age, maybe I was 19 or 20 years old. I had my first panic attack when I was driving on the freeway. And my panic attack may have been maybe 45 seconds, 1 minute. For me, it felt like an eternity, of course, in that moment when I had shortness of breath, I was hyperventilating. So that was a very specific experience with anxiety. And over the years, I think as I move in life, my anxieties also shift and they shape and they have a different color, right? I have been afraid of failing many times. I have been afraid of saying the wrong thing at the wrong time to the wrong person. So I think it's, on the one hand, my experience dealing with anxiety, and also in my personal life, of course, I have seen friends and clients in which anxiety can completely narrow their life and shapes them to become someone they are not. And they stop living authentic lives. So I think all that has translated into being passionate about helping people to get unstuck from any type of anxiety.
Oh, I so appreciate how you're seeing the interconnectedness. I definitely understand anxiety. And when we talk about even phobias, that people tend to restrict their functioning in the world or where they go in an effort to not confront the fear, right? If I'm afraid of snakes, I don't go on a hike, or if I don't, whatever the fears are, I feel scared on a bridge and I don't cross bridges, or, it starts to then become really restricting. And then when we fast forward, this could even be agoraphobia where I don't even leave the house and those type of things. And
That's right.
as you look at perfectionism, indecision, procrastination, these constellation of tendencies, it sounds like you're seeing that as a cluster of things that relate to anxiety. Is that right?
I think you got it right. It sounds a little bit like a cliche what I say, but it's not. I really believe that our anxieties, fears, and worries don't travel in isolation, but in connection. As we move in life, whether you are in a relationship, whether you are thinking about being in a relationship, whether you're thinking about your career, your friends, you are thinking of your hobbies, fears are going to show up. And our fears, can sometimes be present in many settings, in many situations. So one of the things that happens with fear is exactly what you were saying, that it narrows our behavioral repertoire. We stop doing less and we start avoiding a lot. And because of that, I think we all play it safe in life. There is no human being that doesn't play it safe, right? We do all types of things to manage our fears, worries, and anxieties in the moment. The challenge is when we play it safe too much, too quick, and too often. So I think I am a big proponent that, and you have seen this with your clients, and I see the same, that when a person walks into our office, for the most part, they are dealing with multiple types of anxiety. It's not just one fear. The coexistence of our fears, this constellation you're referring to, I think it's very palpable and very tangible in our own lives and in our clients' lives.
I so appreciate, Patricia, how you are acknowledging and validating how normal and human it is. This is, I mean, we are wired up to protect ourselves, right? When we look at the nervous system and how our fight, flight, and freeze, fawn responses kick in, that is an effort to protect ourselves and also storing information around what has felt painful. And so we are trying to mitigate those fears by our tracking system. And that sets us up to not only have a negative bias and that we are seeing things and what could happen in effort to protect ourselves. And as you're saying, if I'm understanding, if we go too far to the continuum of protection or playing it safe, that we lose touch with our own vitality, what matters to us, our sense of purpose and authenticity. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, no, I think exactly. If I can pick it up a little bit, many times when we're dealing with anxiety in any setting, we perceive that our anxiety is the enemy, that we have to have a battle against anxiety, that we have to get rid of, that we have to replace it. And the reality is that, as you are describing, our anxiety is there to protect us. Our anxiety is part of our common humanity. It just happens that our mind tells us all types of things. Watch out for this. What if this happened? Could you make a fool of yourself in this moment, right? But what if there is an earthquake in a week? So the mind comes with this strong function of taking care of ourselves. So when anxiety kicks in, the worst thing that we can do is to fight back, right? To resist it. I think this idea of actually leaning in, making room for it, noticing when it shows up, is actually what is going to help us to have a different relationship with anxiety. A relationship in which we don't have to see it as our enemy, but we acknowledge that our mind went into this protective mode. And what we want to do is notice that, experience that, sense that, and then ask ourselves, what is important to me in this moment? What are my values? What really matters right now as my heart is beating really fast, right? So I think that those acknowledging that, yes, our mind takes us into this protective way and that anxiety is not the enemy and that we have the freedom to choose how to respond to our anxieties makes a huge difference in our lives.
Absolutely. And if I'm understanding in my own experience with this, is that when I can come into contact with what really matters to me or what I'm feeling on a deeper level, that those are almost the keys to work with that really assist me in liberation. And not that the fear or the anxiety goes away, but the struggle. Because when, as you say, and when we make anxiety wrong or bad, it's almost like the anxiety is the issue and we're broken or we have issues or we have some problem. And then we're trying to not feel anxious. But when we're really scared, how do you not feel anxious when you're scared? And if you're scared and you acknowledge you're scared, then it's like, oh, how do I support myself in being scared?
That's right. That's right. It's a very different conversation, a different relationship, right? And as you were saying, I always like to talk about how, again, I know in my own life, I I should write a resume of my fears, basically. I should not resume a bit of my fears. And but one of the things that happens to me, for example, the last 18 years, I have been giving um, different types of workshops, nationally, internationally, small audiences, 50 people, large audiences. And I can honestly say that the first 5 minutes when I am there starting to present, of course, my heart is going to beat fast. My mind tells me, oh my gosh, you're going to make a fool of yourself. What, people don't like your material. And I have learned over the years to let those thoughts be, to let my heart beat fast, to let my hands get sweaty a little bit, right? And it's in that acceptance that sounds very simplistic that we do liberate ourselves to do what matters, right? I think to me, that question in those moments is, Patricia, what is really important for you right now? And it is to present, to disseminate acceptance and commitment skills for anxiety. When I get in contact with the value, what matters, my heart still beats fast, but I am intentionally choosing what to pay attention and intentionally choosing how to show up to what is in front of me. So I think in life, many times when anxiety kicks in, as it does in every day, we are awake from the moment we open our eyes to the moment we fell asleep. There are many moments of fear. We do need to ask ourselves what matters in this moment. What is
Yes.
really important to me, right?
Yes, I think it's such a good orientation or ability to navigate to keep the North Star, if you will, of direction on in alignment with what really matters. Because again, if we're driven by fears or playing it safe, then we're likely going to be playing whack-a-mole, right? Like, and it's a lot of energy when we may not actually be investing in what really is truly most meaningful.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. If I can add a little bit,
Yes.
Jessica, I think it is true when we don't know how to manage anxiety, we invest a lot of mental resources in replacing our anxiety, judging the anxiety, judging ourselves. What's wrong with me? I shouldn't be feeling this way. We do all types of things to play it safe, right? If you're afraid of making a fool of yourself in a social setting, you may always make sure that you have your cell phone with you, or you may carry your glass of scotch with you, right? Just
Yeah.
to make it more manageable. But at some point, all of that is going to backfire against us because fundamentally, I think life is very different when we can fully be ourselves,
Yes.
when our behaviors are not dictated by anxiety and fear, right? So I think the problem is not the anxiety, it's how we respond to it as an internal experience.
Yes. And I wonder what you would say, because as we're talking, I'm aware of a concept that I think is just so important, especially as we look at intimate relating, and that is tolerating discomfort. And I think it applies to what you're saying across the board. And when we're negotiating intimate relationship with the attachment need of feeling loved and safe, and also feeling the ability to be ourselves, and like we're good enough and free, like those things sometimes feel conflicting, but
Yeah.
those needs are so primal. And when we are attempting to play it safe and maybe not rock the boat or bring up a different opinion that may not be that's not popular, or that you might know is your partner is not going to like, that tolerating some difficult conversations or the discomfort, self-soothing to manage the anxieties, not to make them bad, but that
Yeah.
is such a key to development.
Yeah, I think, as you were talking, I was nodding my head because one of the things I have encountered professionally is that there is this form of perfectionism. It's called interpersonal perfectionism. And it's a little bit what you are describing, right? When we have higher standards about the partners we want to be, the friends we want to be, and any variation is that if I am disappointing people, if the person in front of me gets upset, if I rock the boat with my boss or with my friends, makes it really, really hard for me to have a healthy and authentic connection with another human being, right? Um, so I think when any person is dealing with this fear of rocking the boat, as you were calling, or disappointing others,
Yes.
or by
Not
nature,
belonging, not feeling accepted, or yeah.
that's right. They're afraid of being rejected, right? They're afraid of being abandoned many times. I think it is important to acknowledge that there are certainly values on how we want to show up in the relationship, and there are also values in how we want to relate to ourselves. And sometimes these interpersonal values, they look like they're in conflict with our personal values, right? But they are not. It's more the behaviors, right? I think sometimes you may have to choose to rock the boat in the service of being honest, in the service of speaking your truth, right?
Yes. Which is what you were saying about the long term, right? Versus short term. Yes.
That's right. So in the long term, I choose to be authentic in the service of creating depth and this connection, right?
Yes.
And over times, of course, we're going to choose to show up in the relationship and let things go. But I think what we want to avoid is developing a pattern of repetitive responses in which I am overly focused on always being this supporting friend that say yes to everything, or being the partner that I never disagrees, right? Or I just never create conflict. I'm not the one starting conflicts, right? Because all of that really, I think, creates a lot of resentment towards ourselves.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
And fast forward, it's hard to feel that the relationship is going to be a reflection of you. Like if we're talking about to this person, it's hard to feel like this relationship is going to represent what matters to you because you haven't necessarily brought it forth.
I agree. It's like sometimes if you engage in those behaviors driven by these fears of disappointing others or rocking the boat, it is like you're building a castle on the sky made of glass.
Yes.
It's going to break at any point, right?
Right.
It's a matter of time. And also the other thing that happens is that every human being, we all are wired to experience meaning and connection in authentic ways. At some point in our lives, we know we are not getting that. We know we are not feeling that, right?
Exactly. So, like fast forward, we may look at the castle that we built and not like it and not want to have anything to do with it because it's like, that's not me. That's not what I want.
That's right. So, but I feel our fears in relationships, this fear of disappointing others, this fear of rejecting others, make us many times to really avoid conflict, to avoid asserting ourselves, to avoid saying no. And you see that across relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, relationships with our relatives, you name it, right?
Absolutely.
And I think the other fear that I see that shows up in relationships, Jessica, is this fear of commitment. This fear of fully committing myself to see how this relationship could grow, to see how this relationship could move in an X direction. I think in the information era, many times that's one of the biggest struggles, right? Are we willing to commit to the person in front of us, not knowing how things are going to be? You have to tolerate uncertainty for that commitment, right?
Yes. I'm curious how you would encourage somebody to navigate that because one of the things that I find myself encouraging is that what can you say yes to? What parts can you commit to? And are there still question marks? And can you be in the discovery process and the unknown and saying, I am interested in exploring or I'm committed to having this type of relationship. I don't know if it's with you yet. And then maybe you're talking about, is there a point where I have enough data, but I'm still scared to make the decision? And maybe I witnessed divorce in my family, or maybe I just don't know if it's going to, there's no way to know. That's part of the mystery.
That's right.
How do you encourage people to work with just that fear of commitment?
Those are beautiful tips, right? I will just add to what you're saying, because of my focus on anxiety, right?
Yes.
I think there are different ways to manage our intolerance for uncertainty. Sometimes I like to talk with my clients about uncertainty workouts. We're intentionally putting ourselves into trying new things. It doesn't have to be like jumping off the cliff or climbing the Himalaya. It's not about that. It's about trying new things. It's about going to a restaurant that you never have go and order a dish that usually you wouldn't. Because intolerance of uncertainty creates rules about what you should do, what you cannot do, right? Yes. So you can try by breaking those rules. You can sometimes flip a coin and decide which side is going to go. You're going to go for a hike, for example, um, or to watch a movie that usually will say, "I won't ever watch this movie," right? So uncertainty workouts really an invitation for all of us to try something with openness. Not with judgmental eyes, not when the mind tells us it's going to be terribly, awfully bad, but really with openness, let's see how it is, right? And
Yes.
to really get attuned to that. So that's I think one skill I like to practice with my clients. We come up with different exercises to practice uncertainty workouts. Um, the other I think the other skill that I like to teach my clients, it's really acknowledging that in life, no one is going to have 100% certainty of anything. And that requires humility. That's not just talking, right? It's just really um accepting with humility that we are human beings. We are not super beings, but we are human beings with limitations. And one of the limitations is that we're never going to have 100% certainty about anything, right?
Absolutely.
That's just part of, being alive again. Um, and then I invite my clients to look at that workability of their actions. When you are chasing for certainty, you're trying to answer every single question you have, right? Sometimes people in relationships, they have a checklist, right? Like, does this
Mhm.
person do this or that, blah, 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 right? But that checklist is actually another form of avoidance. Because at the end, with uncertainty, there are going to be many questions that they don't have an answer. You won't know because we're trying to understand something that we're ahead, with experience, right?
Yes.
So I think the other aspect is really when the uncertainty comes, then you make room for it. How does it show up in your body? Is it static? Is it moving? What is it pushing you to do? What is this uncertainty pushing to demand? Is it asking you for reassurance? Is it asking you to do more? Is it asking you to text more, to call more, to ask more, right? And really looking, is that consistent with how I want to be in this moment? Is that consistent with my values? So I think there is a lot to say about making room for uncertainty as an emotion, acknowledging that we live in a world in which nothing has 100% certainty, and practicing uncertainty workouts intentionally.
Yes.
Intentional, right? To getting on the habit of having new experiences with open eyes, with beginner's mind. So those will be some of the things and skills I talk to my clients about.
It's so important because as we're talking about this, I mean, I'm even thinking of, I don't know if you ever studied any of David Schnarch's work around differentiation, but he talks
Mm.
about this is, as I think about intimate relationship, that
Mm.
most of us don't do the actual growing up and maturing because of this difficulty tolerating discomfort. Like we're
Mm.
in
Mm.
service of avoiding. So these
Yeah,
uncertainty workouts
yeah,
just seems so helpful to build some muscles around tolerating the unknown, the uncertainty. And it ironically, I think, builds some self efficacy that we don't have to have everything controlled around us. We can begin to trust how like we're capable to handle something that is unknown. I mean, that's one of the things fundamentally about anxiety, right? We're not anxious about things we're confident about or that are like
that's
a
right.
skill. Like if we have a skill of tying our
Yeah.
shoes, we're not worried about tying our shoes, right? And it's a future event. But if we're anticipating a future event that we don't feel confident in, then we're going to likely feel anxious about that. So to be in the practice of tolerating the ambiguity or the uncertainty, I think gives a little bit more felt experience that, yes, this is anxiety provoking, or I don't know, or maybe my heart is beating, as you were talking about the public speaking, but that I will be okay, right? Because if the belief that you're helping people challenge is I need to have everything accounted for me to feel safe, when that actually isn't possible. There's no way we can account for every single variable in life.
No, 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 no. No, I
It
think
seemed like you wanted to say something. Yes.
that's right. I just want to add, I am not familiar with this researcher, but one of the psychological principles within acceptance and commitment therapy is it's called experiential avoidance.
Yeah.
And basically, it's referring to what you are describing, right? This response to our thoughts, feelings, sensations that really is characterized by avoiding, minimizing, ignoring, dismissing, all because we cannot make room for them, right? We start, experiencing anxiety or grief or depression or sadness is already painful. It's already uncomfortable, right? When your heart is beating fast, it's very uncomfortable. But if on top of that, you start avoiding things, you're avoiding the feeling that you're experiencing under your skin, and you're also avoiding the situations in the world that trigger that feeling, right? So experiential avoidance at the end is adding more suffering. Because then I'm not dealing just with this first layer of pain, my heart beating fast, or the loneliness, or the feeling down. I'm also dealing with the consequences of my avoidance, right? So
Yes.
there is something really powerful that I think many psychotherapy models have addressed it in some way, right? As you were saying, it's our inability to tolerate discomfort. In that, we talk about experiential avoidance lead us to a struggle, and which is so true. It's so true
Yes.
for a lot of our suffering in life.
Yes. And this could potentially be true for people negotiating past traumas or relational trauma. And I even wonder about some neurodivergent experiences. Does this fit? Because if the world or even family or relationship is operating neurotypically, it's hard to see that there's a space for you. And then these feelings of discomfort, but how does it fit? Or how is my way of processing or experiencing okay or good? And the disconnect there, or when we haven't had trust or safety relationally, it can be incredibly activating. Do you want to talk about trauma or neurodivergence as it relates to what we're describing?
Yeah, I can. I think I can chime in specifically about trauma, right? Trauma, perhaps, and all types of trauma, interpersonal trauma, trauma because of natural disasters, trauma because of aggression. I think it's one of those experiences that shapes our world and who we are in so many ways. And it led us to have a sometimes chronic pattern of avoidance. Makes it hard for our nervous system to get regulated many times.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that we try to do within acceptance and commitment therapy act, it's really help our clients and ourselves to develop what we call more psychological flexibility, right? And if a person has been exposed to a single form of trauma or multiple events that are having traumatics, whether that's at the small P or the big T, as we will be talking about, that doesn't mean that they cannot let skills to really let to relate to that experiences in a more compassionate way, in a more effective way. But to your point, I think many times the things that we go through in life reinforce these avoidance patterns and
Yes.
increase our intolerance and difficulties to sit with discomfort, whether that's physiological discomfort, psychological discomfort, right? So my goodness, these days we do have evidence-based and compassionate skills to teach people how to relate to that, right? There is so much to say around that.
Yes.
But I agree with you. I think there's some experiences that really reinforce the avoidance pattern all the way.
Well, and thank you for speaking to how this can manifest and how an ACT practitioner or psychologist like yourself might approach. And it sounds very congruent with what's already been shared, and even with the uh, workouts of the uncertainty. Is that what they're called? Uncertainty workouts?
I call them uncertainty workouts, yes.
Yeah, I love it. That they can be scaled where it's doable. It doesn't have to be, as you said, jumping off a cliff or a huge big risk. It could be something that feels even micro workout that gives an opportunity with that compassionate, as you said, the curiosity, the not judging or blaming, but with that compassion. I would love for you to say a little bit more about that. But typically these tendencies of either perfectionism or some of these ways in which we relate, they are, as you said, protective. So they likely served a good purpose at some point. Maybe we're even adaptive, right? If we look at certain environments. And then as we look at expanding our capacity, living in more authenticity and having more meaningful interactions or not feeling so restricted, living more freely, that to build these muscles with these workouts and have more range, more flexibility, that, that this could be a really great resource to be in practice of.
Yeah. I was nodding my head as you were talking because in the context of anxieties, whether that's a person with a specific phobia or the fear of making mistakes or fears of performance anxiety or productivity anxiety or traumatic based experiences, one of the things that we do in our work is helping clients to develop what we call values based exposure manuals. And exposure it's for the audience that is not familiar, it's an evidence-based treatment that helps us to approach our fears in a more systematic way. And the ways in which we do exposure has evolved over the last 30 years. So within ACT, basically, the goal is to link every exposure exercise we do to our values, but the way that we approach it is also very different, right? I think, if I am afraid of,
Talking to my spouse or
okay, talking to my spouse, for example, right? I may, um, that's interesting. I may just exercise, maybe just go and talking to your spouse, right? And say what you think, and you may have maybe a script of you want, right? And say like, you may use the I statements, this is a situation, I think, I need, and I feel this, right? That's one way of doing it. And it's effective, sure. But the thing within Agua, what more interesting is first looking how you're relating to the experience of thinking talking to your husband, right?
yes,
Like if I'm with you, I will say, okay, so let's visualize that you are there talking to your husband about wanting to see the taxes for this year. I know your husband has told you, don't worry about it, everything is fine, but you genuinely want to know what's our financial situation. So I would like to see, how we have the papers, filing taxes. So imagine that for a moment. As you're holding into that image, what's showing up in your body? And you notice the sensation. What is your mind telling you? Right? What happens if you go along with the thought, right? What's the value for you right now? So we will do a lot of checking how the person relate to these internal experiences, how they are relating to thoughts, feelings, sensations, how they're relating to the person in front of them, to the outside world, right? So all this in the service, not of experiencing more or less anxiety, right? But in the service of making room for what shows up on the inside as you're taking a behavioral step. So the conversation is very, very different, right? When you're doing values-based exposure, it's not something that you check off from a list or you say, done, I did it. I talked to my husband, right? But more interesting in that intentionality you're putting in that experience. How did I show up? Right? How did I show up to myself as the noise was coming up, as I had body noise and thinking noise? How did I show up when I was looking at a person and I saw maybe my husband frowning a little bit or opening the eyes, right? What happened to me, right? So it's a very, I think, compassionate conversation. It's still helping people to approach their fears, but in a more intentional way without rushing through it. Because right, our fears make as though everything is in really fast, right? Done and done. But reality is that
yes,
right, but I think the reality and science has shown this to develop these new relationship with your fears requires that you slow down. That requires that we pause and make room for that. Because in that experience is that when we liberate ourselves again to choose how to respond to the outside world to ourselves, the rushing through, the powering through, the telling you done and done. We're like, okay, that's interesting, but it's not necessarily going to be long lasting.
no.
Because you're still run, you're still avoiding, right? You're still avoiding.
Yes, you can white knuckle it and you did it, but does that get
Yes.
you a different pattern or in a nervous system felt embodied experience? And I love this because even people listening, intellectually might say, oh yeah, easy enough to have the difficult conversation that I want to have. But in reality, not so easy. And so to
No,
be
no.
able to do some real unpacking and understanding of what gets activated and the sensations and the thinking, and to give some real space to that, gives a different experience, as you're saying, and also gives us more to be in practice and working with. And we could even slice that thinner, right? And have some baby steps that could be
That's right.
further in alignment with the values, and what that can feel like if it's, again, making it a little bit more doable.
That's right. And you can go into this other micro skill of, we call it diffusion, in which you're noticing and naming those thoughts, right? Here comes Judge Patricia, right? You know, I know. Did you know that's one of the names I give to these thoughts sometimes, right? I have Cranky Patricia and Judge Patricia. But we know that when we're going to have conversations that matter to us, of course, our mind is going to tell us all types of things. So noticing and naming those thoughts is another micro skill to practice, right? All in the service of helping the relationship to win, right? And
Yeah.
helping ourselves to have a different relationship with anxiety. So I
Yes.
think all that makes a huge difference in the quality of our lives.
And what we can engage with, right? Again, the empowerment of living in alignment with what matters most, and taking action on things that maybe we're been scared to do, that we could feel that more confidence. So before we just, I know our time is winding down, would you like to say anything about what it looks like, or an example of the compassion, how that.
Yeah, that looks in my work in different ways, right? And I'm sure you are already working with your clients on these skills. For example, with procrastination, which is often misunderstood, people think that it's a matter of willpower, that it's a personality trait, that someone is not very action oriented. But there are many psychological processes leading a person to procrastinate, right? So one of the things I have found with procrastination, and that's what I wrote in my book, it's really helping people first to map the psychological process, what they are avoiding, what is the role they are holding onto, what is the self-doubtful thoughts they're having, what is the emotion they're having a difficult time accepting, what is the value they are disconnecting from. Um, and then from that, I invite them to visualize their compassion itself, to visualize the criticizing self, and notice when these two different selves are getting activated.
Nice.
And then from that, I like to talk about compassionate accountability. Um, Acknowledging that when our mind comes up with all types of reasons, you have extra time, you can do this last minute, you don't need to do it now, right? We have the capacity to acknowledge that and to choose, right? To choose how to respond to that. So that's one way. In the work specific of fears, if a person is dealing with specific fears, including fear of abandonment, the fear of rejection, I like to talk about wise moves. Wise moves is an acronym, basically. The W stands for watching your mind. What's your mind telling you? What's showing up in your mind? Is it an image? Is it a thought, right? Can you invite those experiences, right? We know when we are wrestling and resisting internally, right? So the avoidance is like really practicing this attitude of acceptance. The S stands for stay with the experience. Are you staying with those thoughts? Are you staying with that sensation? Is there any part that you're trying to get rid of them, replacing them, telling yourself everything is going to be okay? The E stands for making a choice either towards your value or away from your values. No one can make that choice for us, right? It's such an individual choice. The M of the wise moves, the M stands for making a choice, right?
Okay.
Fundamentally, we're more invested in teaching our clients the capacity to choose, to be the owners of their decisions in relating to this experience. The O means observe what shows up. Once you make a choice, when you decide how to relate to this internal experience, what happens? Um, And then the V, it's more like validating that. How can you appreciate the hard work? It may feel sometimes simplistic, but choosing in the midst of having a panic attack, in the midst of having a worry thought, in the midst of having, this fear of abandonment, it's a big thing. It's a bold move. It's courageous, right? It's
Yes.
very
Yes.
courageous. So appreciating that and appreciating what we do doesn't mean that we're letting ourselves off the hook. It just means that we're just treating ourselves with gentleness as a choice because it helps us to self-regulate again. Self-compassion helps us with self-regulation again.
Yeah.
Um, and finally, the S is stay from the wise moves. It's really about staying present with life. I think there is so much happening in life in front of us, right? So I like to talk about the wise moves as a micro skills, right? To see how we can respond to anxiety. The funny thing is that sometimes in my work, when I introduce this to my clients, they come back and they say, I got the wise very well. The mood is, I didn't go for it yet. So, but I think
It's a
that would be
practice.
another, it's a practice, the
Yeah.
practice in which you're blending facing your fears in an act way and adding compassion in the moment. So that's another way.
I love it. And I just appreciate how explicit the values are woven into this the choosing and the commitment around what we're going to take action with, and also supporting our system, right? That it's not just a white knuckling it or bypassing our fears. It's really helping look at what is this indicating? What am I experiencing? And really helping the guidance. Because I think truly, I worked with adolescents for in the beginning of my career, and I was a wilderness therapist for a summer at one of the therapeutic kind of wilderness programs. And it was very interesting to me that in this particular group of young girls, that adolescent girls, that their parents were extremely well intended, but
Mm.
many of them didn't ever really experience a boundary, never really washed a dish, like didn't like the almost not wanting their child to have to deal with a no or deal with difficult feelings. Somehow I'm not at all suggesting it was like parents' fault, so please hear that. But there
No.
was something important around the process of learning how to deal with difficult emotions of like, I don't want to do this, or I'm uncomfortable with this, or I'm scared about this. And having a process of how to deal with that, I think, as you just described, it gives some scaffolding to life will be challenging. It will be
Mhm.
scary. And let's
Mhm.
look at how do we deal with that, and how do we support you, or how do we support us to find our integrity and take action that feels within our ability, that we can contribute towards, again, a choice that we feel good about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I appreciate what you're sharing because here is a beautiful emotion, parenting love, right? I
Yes.
really want to protect my kid. But I think sometimes in the service of love, we play it safe. Right?
Yes.
Sometimes as a service
Yeah.
of love, we play it safe, right? That's what this
Yes.
is. It's like when you are protecting, your kid with good intentions, with so much love from anything that could disappoint them, could make things hard for them, right?
Yes.
And I think sometimes that's another situation which we can check. Is this loving behavior expanding my kid's life or is it contracting it? Right? Is
Yes.
this loving behavior expanding me, helping me to be the parent I want to be, or taking me farther away? Right? But there we go. That's something that we do with love. We can become overprotective sometimes.
Yes. Absolutely.
We can play it safe.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for everything you're sharing. I just know you have so much to offer, the books that you've written, the center that you direct and lead, and it sounds like you speak and give workshops. So for people who are resonating or finding how helpful your suggestions and messages, what would you like to direct people towards?
That's a good question. I'm pausing to think. These days in the information era, we have so many social media accounts, right? But I think my website, the www.thisisdrz.com, that's perhaps the easiest way when people can get a sense of what I am working on, my books and newsletter. I think that will be one main source.
Great. Okay. Is there anything else you want to direct people towards? You have your website, you have social media.
Yes. Well, for people who are interested, I have this new upcoming book on procrastination.
Nice.
I think procrastination is really a struggle for many people dealing with depression, emotion regulation. It shows up definitely in relationships, right? Relationship, one partner is the go-getter, and the other partner the struggle getting things done. So this book is it's a workbook for people to really tap into what leads them to avoid getting things done, and I think has a lot of skills. So that's one thing I would recommend people. It's available right now for pre-order on Amazon, and I personally can't wait to hold the book in my hands.
Oh, oh my goodness. Yes. Well, and I'll make sure to put a few of your other books on today's show notes, along with your website and your social media. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been a treat. And please, Sarah, I really appreciate also all the work you're doing. I have listened episodes from your podcast, and you're really, I think, sharing incredible resources for people to have authentic relationships with themselves and with others. So my appreciation for what you are doing.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to spend this time with you. I am grateful for your listenership. Until next time, I hope you take great care.